Hello and welcome to this edition of Fulton Justice. I'm your host, Yolanda Lewis, District Court Administrator for the Atlanta Judicial Circuit. This program is dedicated to providing you with resources, information, and a closer look at how our justice system works for you. Access to justice is one of the most important elements to the efficient operation of the Superior Court of Fulton County. As the demographics of our county change year by year, ensuring that the individuals who enter the Justice Center complex are able to interact with the best of their ability is extremely important. In the last 3 years, the court has responded to the potential language barriers that we see in our jurisdiction with an increase in on-site interpreter and translation services. Our services include the creation of a new online interpreter reservation system, which can be accessed by attorneys and the public to secure language assistance prior to a hearing. In addition, the court has created a limited English assistance plan, which serves as the blueprint to provide services to persons with limited English proficiency and compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and also Federal Executive Order 13166. Today we'll talk to Linda Smith, the Education and Certification Officer at the Georgia Commission on Interpreters, to discuss her role in improving interpreter services in Fulton County and the state of Georgia. We will also be joined by Carlos Larez and Patricia Chavez-Dietz, who each work on site with the Superior Court as Spanish interpreters. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Fulton Justice. Joining us now is Ms. Linda Smith, Education and Certification Officer at the Georgia Commission on Interpreters. Ms. Smith, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we are not strangers. We both have worked at the Administrative Office of the Courts, which is a state office in the judiciary. So I'm excited to have you here today. So tell me a little bit, let's talk about your career before we talk about the commission, because you've had an interesting career path to Georgia, correct?
Yes, correct.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I am originally from New Orleans, and I moved here following Hurricane Katrina. While living in New Orleans, I actually worked for the Louisiana Supreme Court in their domestic violence relations division. I was so fortunate when I moved here that there was availability and an opening at the Administrative Office of the Courts. At the time that I applied for that position, I had no idea that it really parlayed almost equally to what I was doing in Louisiana. So I'm very happy to be here now serving the citizens of Georgia.
And I'm happy that we've had an opportunity to really work together because you do phenomenal work.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the Commission on Interpreters.
Okay.
I am very excited about all of the work that the Commission is responsible for. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Commission, and it has been a phenomenal 5-year experience for me. So tell me a little bit about, let's tell our viewers a little bit about what the Commission is responsible for.
Sure. The Commission was created in 2003 by the Georgia Supreme Court really to come up with a standard of rules to provide a statewide plan for the use of interpreters. Thereby, all the courts will kind of know what the regulations are, how interpreters should be used, how they are qualified, that we can give the citizens of Georgia with limited English proficiency trained interpreters to help them in all court proceedings.
And I want to talk a little bit about more about the Commission, in that how is the Commission structured? How many people? Who is the chairperson for this Commission? And really, how much of an impact do you have on the state?
Okay. The Commission is comprised of 18 members. It is chaired by Justice Keith Blackwell. The membership includes a representative from each class of court, 4 attorneys, a member of the Georgia General Assembly, a state board designee, and 3 laypersons, which are usually court administrator and court interpreters.
And I think it's so important to understand how many different fields are represented on the Commission, because this issue of language barriers is so pervasive and it's so important in our courts that's really the key to having a really diverse commission, correct?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the importance of having certified interpreters in our court. Tell me a little bit about the different types of interpreters that we may see in our court system and how you are involved in that process.
Sure. Court interpreters serve a tremendous role in providing the limited English speaker with the opportunity to hear what is being said in the courts. We have 3 levels of interpreters, which are certified, conditionally approved, and registered. The core requirements for these designations are the same. The main distinction is the demonstrated skill level and the language. Court interpreters represent the highest standard of certified interpreters represent the highest standard of interpreting. Conditionally approved interpreters demonstrate an acceptable level of interpreters. For our registered interpreters, a registered license is only issued for languages whereby the National Center of State Courts does not have an oral certification exam due to lesser diffusion in that language, for example, Hindi.
And so I think it's very important for people to understand when you say certified, these are people who have gone through the process of educating themselves or being formally educated through services that are available to them, but also who have taken tests to ensure that they understand legalese. So how difficult is it to become a certified interpreter?
The process for certified is pretty rigorous. The exams are rigorous intently because we want to make sure that our courts have the best qualified interpreters available, as well as with the conditionally approved interpreters and the registered interpreters. It's not overly difficult to become certified interpreters, and based on the feedback that we have received from interpreters and some who may not have scored high as they would have liked, the exam is difficult, but it's also fair.
And so one of the things I think is very important for people to know is that years ago, we didn't see as many interpreters in our courts as we do today. What has changed the dynamics of our courts and how we respond to the need for interpreters?
Well, what's really changing is really the composition of the population, and that it's becoming now more diverse, and we're seeing more limited English speakers coming into the courts, and we're realizing that we need to provide more services to assist these persons as they navigate through the court system.
Some of our interpreters, of course, you of course know some of our interpreters that are in our court. They serve all of the different types of matters that we see before us. Now, there was a time when there was a thought process that really interpreters were provided to folks in criminal matters. Talk a little bit about the sea change that happened maybe 2-3 years ago, where now every critical stage in the judicial process or in the court process you have to have an interpreter for.
Yes, well, the U.S. Department of Justice actually issued a memorandum to the state courts saying just by making that interpreter available, that's not really providing the interpreter. And they more or less mandated that the courts provide the interpreter by paying for the interpreter and also making the interpreter available for civil cases and court-connected cases. So if someone had to go to an anger management class, they should also have an interpreter there to assist them in that type of environment.
So now that's an interesting point because that requires funding.
Yes.
Right. And so often courts really try to express that this is not a service that is a luxury. It is actually a mandate, and the cost associated with it is very high, but it's required of us, correct?
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about your compliance arm. I know that you, of course, provide education services for interpreters, but then once they become certified or approved, then they have to keep up their educational requirements. So how do you all ensure that interpreters comply with those rules?
Absolutely. We ensure because we offer and we're now developing even more training opportunities for our interpreters for continuing education to make sure that they keep their skill levels up. Another way that we ensure compliance, the Commission has 2 disciplinary panels that really address alleged complaints of interpreter misconduct. Interpreters are held to high standards of professional responsibility as well as ethical standards. And if there's an alleged complaint of misconduct on either of those standards, which could include neutrality, accuracy, confidentiality, the Commission will take that up to make sure that the interpreters are performing in the way that their oath qualifies and dictates that they perform in our courts.
Interpreting services are critical to our courts today. What do you think is the future of interpreting services for the justice system across the board in the future?
I really see the trend going toward offering more technology-related services for our courts, primarily like with remote interpreting, to really use technology to get in other areas that we may not right now be addressing adequately, but that technology absolutely will help us in rural areas where there may be a shortage of interpreters because they're further out, and many of our qualified interpreters reside in the metro area. So technology will enable us to reach those courts that may not have immediate access to an interpreter, thereby reducing costs of actually paying for an interpreter to travel. I also see the changes as far as the population changes and become more diverse. We're actually going to have to expand services, provide more court documents in different languages that our court users can actually have documents in the language of their choice to kind of help them navigate through. And we should also focus on keeping the courts abreast of the needs and the challenges that are faced by the limited English proficient person.
So it's a lot of work yet to be done.
It is absolutely a lot of work.
Well, thank you so much for all of the work that you do, and thank you for the work that the Commission is doing each day for our courts. We really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Up next, we'll speak with Carlos Larez and Patricia Chavez-Dietz, certified interpreters in the Fulton County Superior Court. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Fulton Justice. We would like to welcome now Mr. Larez, who's an interpreter for our court, and Ms. Chavez-Dietz, who is also joining us for the show. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what you do every day. You both have been interpreters with our court for a while, and Mr. Larez, you've been with our court for a very long time. Tell us what you see each day.
Well, my role is to be a communicator between any office of the judicial system we're in with anyone who does not speak English, especially in Spanish.
Spanish.
Yes.
And do you speak other languages?
I speak only Spanish fluently. I understand Portuguese and maybe a little bit of Italian, but only because they're Latin languages and the root is similar to Spanish. But
And Ms. Dietz, you've also been with our court for a very long time, but you've worked outside of our court in other jurisdictions, correct?
Yes, I've been an interpreter for 16 years, and I'm being in the Fulton County Superior Court for about a little bit more than a year.
So interpreting services are very important to our court system, and you all are on the front lines. Where do you see yourself assisting most, in criminal matters or in domestic or even in civil matters you're involved in? So where do you see the most need?
Well, as you said, criminal matters are really where we are more engaged. However, we do a lot of civil matters, family law division, divorces, legitimations. And sometimes we are engaged in helping people within the building to get to places.
When you were in the building?
So typically it will be criminal matters mostly.
And you also do some work with domestic matters, and one of the things I really want to get into is to talk about some of the domestic matters where children are involved. But I know that you provide services in courtrooms, but interestingly enough, people come into the courthouse all the time and just don't know where to go, and they can't communicate. So how often do you see that?
Very often, and if we find ourselves walking from one assignment to the other, it would sometimes will take a little bit longer because you see that lost look, and we have to approach them and we direct them, and they feel like we're angels. You know, it's like this is our job, this is our duty, but we have to help them to maneuver all the different buildings that are part of the Superior Court.
And in addition to buildings, I know that I've seen both of you try to read forms and things of that nature, which is very critical when there's a language barrier trying to comply with the sentencing order and things of that nature. How have you been able to assist the court in really just articulating to people what they're reading, because all of our forms are in English?
Yes. Well, as interpreters, we are asked to read all the documents through a side translation, that's what we call them, to the non-English speaker. So as communicators, what we try to do is convey the meaning, because sometimes just reading neutrally, which is what we do, does not help. So sometimes what we have to do is basically convey the meaning so they can then respond to the order of the court, whatever that may be, in order for them to be able to get to the probation office, for example, if it is, or in order for them to comply with whatever it is that the court decided in their case.
And can I add something? And I think that's one of the very important parts for us, to read those documents that are all in English for them to understand, because we see the other end when people don't understand what they have given and how the problems grow because they didn't get to their appointment, they didn't follow all the conditions. So that's why it's important, the side translation of the documents.
So I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you don't comply, and just generally, you all interact with the Spanish-speaking community, and sometimes when there's not a feeling that the court is responding, there's a little bit of a distrust for the court. So how important is what you all do to going towards helping that community trust that we're here to help?
Patricia mentioned something prior, and it is that a non-English speaker, when they know an interpreter is present, it settles into not a complete trust, however, feels confident and more comfortable that whatever is transpiring will be translated in a way that they can understand and respond. So for the court system as interpreters, when we are asked to translate, our role is very important for fairness of the process, and for trust by the individual that is part of that process. So we kind of act as a communicator, bridge maker between an agency of the system and that non-English speaking individual that requires something of the system. So.
And also, even though we're in the legal system that is, we're very limited, but sometimes the cultural broker, it makes a big difference.
So this is very important for people to understand, that you all are interpreting what is literally being said by the judge, what is being said by other parties, but you're not giving legal advice.
Not at all.
Not at all. And so that's important for people to know, but I'm certain that you are asked for your legal advice all the time.
All the time.
And so how do you respond? Because we are dealing with individuals who are really just trying to get through this process. So how do you respond when you're not saying, I can't give you legal advice?
Well, typically, if we are in a setting where we're next to the lawyer, our responsibility is to translate what that person is saying in Spanish to us. So we would immediately communicate that to the lawyer who is party to the case, the public defender or the private lawyer or the district attorney if it's in the case of a victim. We never like to fall into that gray area, which is typically very easy to actually step into because of the lack of knowledge of the non-English speaker coming into the court system. They think the interpreter may act as an adversarial party or somebody that they can go to for advice. So we remove ourselves from that position by translating whatever that individual may be asking us that is not part of the case. As part of the case. So we expect the lawyers to respond or the court to respond. Or we might ask the court, if that is the case and it persists, for the court to interrupt the proceeding and instruct that person to understand that the interpreter is not anyone to provide legal advice.
You're not the lawyer. Yeah. Now, one thing I do want to mention is we often see individuals come in with children, and oftentimes when they can't communicate, sometimes they ask their children or loved ones to interpret for them. How important is it to remove a family member from that process and have someone who actually understands the legalese to interpret?
Yeah, well, that's why certified interpreters are important, and that's why we are acting as in-house interpreters in Fulton County Superior Court. It is to allow that family who brings that young children who's bilingual to assist the parents or whoever it is that they are translating for in communicating. Right. So in our court system, at least we are called by any of the offices that know that the court does have an interpreter office to interject. And of course the Commission on Interpreter, and you are a part of it, created the certification process to assure proper communication between the courts and non-English speaker individuals that are in need of being assisted by the system.
One last question that I want to ask you, Patricia, what do you think, and you've been doing this for 16 years, what do you think is the future of interpreting, and why is it so important that we stay on top of this for folks that have a language barrier?
Well, I think interpreting is always going to be needed because this is a melting pot. The United States is a melting pot. You're always going to have people coming, finding themselves in situations that nobody wants to be, you know, in the courts. It's never a good thing when you come to accept to get married. But there always is going to be a need of interpreters because they need to have that same right that anybody that speaks English to understand everything that goes on in the legal system.
And so the underlying issue here is that you all are contributing to the protection of folks' rights because you're helping them have access to the system. And what you do is so valuable and so important. And I really appreciate both of you for being here today, but I appreciate all the work that you do for Superior Court. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with some closing thoughts. Welcome back. According to statistics, the top 4 most widely spoken foreign languages in Fulton County are Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, and Chinese. Annually, requests for language interpreting services are provided 75% to criminal defendants, 21% to plaintiffs in civil matters, 3% to jurors, and 1% to victims and witnesses. In accordance with both state and federal law, Fulton County has an obligation to provide spoken language services in all court proceedings, both civil and criminal, and to ensure that all court interpreters meet the qualifications set forth by the Georgia Commission on Interpreters. The court's commitment to providing access to justice and offering quality interpreting services is only one of many ways that we continue to respond to the needs of our community. For more information on how to become a certified Georgia interpreter, please visit the Georgia Commission on Interpreters official website, or for more information on securing an interpreter, visit the Superior Court website at fultoncounty.org. Thank you for joining us today on Fulton Justice. We'll see you next time.